Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the 9 Route, the Week 11 episode. It's the fantasy football show that goes deep to help you win. I'm your host, Austin Lee, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Alex Miglio, fellow Football Guys writer. How you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. We're escaping the polar vortex this week, as we always do in California. So, uh, stay warm anywhere else in the country.
Yes, and since it's the Week 11 episode, we are going to crank it up to 11. This is the most intense episode you've ever had in the entire season. We are ready in our late night after midnight on the East Coast, but we are fresh because it's only 9 o'clock on the West Coast. So we're going to crank it up to 11 for you guys to cover all the latest news, injuries, our daily fantasy sports picks over DraftKings and FanDuel, and just answer some of your Twitter questions too. So, Alex, we got the big Thursday night football game coming up, Buffalo at Miami tomorrow night, and there's some guys that are sort of question marks a little bit for that game in terms of their health. How are you feeling about Lamar Miller, Sammy Watkins, Fred Jackson? What do you paint a picture, if you will, for this Thursday night football game?
This Thursday, I'm not loving the game from an offensive standpoint. There's two good defenses going up against each other. It's a Thursday night, which is never good when it comes to fantasy. I mean, yeah, we've had some big explosions, but I don't expect it to be a blowout. So I don't really like anybody a whole lot. I think Sammy Watkins will be fine. He's healthy, and he did score a touchdown against the Dolphins earlier, but it is in Miami, and the Dolphins have gotten better defensively since the Bills played them. So I'm not loving this matchup.
Yeah, I'm not loving this matchup for any of the offensive players. I hear Brent Grimes talked about a lot when it comes to opponents matched up against him. Is he the kind of corner that can shut down a receiver? Or is it like, well, he's really good, but still, like Sammy Watkins is still gonna, get his points here?
I think he's in between. I think Grimes wants to be a shutdown corner. I think he's close to it. He's very good. We saw him make some fantastic plays last week against Calvin Johnson, but Calvin Johnson got his, and so did Golden Tate, though he didn't get in the end zone. So I mean, I think that Watkins probably will have a decent game. I'm not sure if, it depends on if he scores a touchdown or not, really. But I expect him to probably have 60 or 70 receiving yards, and if he gets in the end zone, that'll be gravy.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think this is one of those games where if you play daily fantasy sports, you're going to want to put out your head-to-head matchups for Thursday night games because a lot of people will jump on Thursday night players for Thursday night daily fantasy things, and I don't think this is the week to play those Thursday night guys unless you're going to take a kicker or a defense here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like I've started to kind of be sneaky and play a lot of Thursday games and fade Thursday night players almost entirely, and that's worked out pretty well. I did that with Jeremy Hill last week in a couple of lineups where I figured a lot of people would play him, and he had a terrible game, and that worked out for me. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect example because he was really highly owned in those Thursday night games. In a contest that started on Thursday night. Let's talk a little bit about some running backs that are either coming back into their lineups or leaving their lineups because of injury. It seems like the most interesting one for fantasy is the Denver backfield. We've got Ronnie Hillman, who's out 2 to 3 weeks. We've got Monte Ball, who's coming back from injury. And C.J. Anderson had this big game last week. What do you think about Denver this week at St. Louis? Is Monte Ball a guy you want in your lineup, C.J. Anderson, or neither?
Well, so Monty Ball's coming off of a big injury, and he wasn't healthy enough to play last week, so I'm a little bit leery of putting him in my lineup. However, C.J. Anderson, there's a lot of love for C.J. Anderson. He made that fantastic one-handed catch, and then he ran down the sideline, scored a touchdown last week. He had a big game, and I think that that kind of endeared him to a lot of fantasy owners, and people went out and got him. I don't think that he's going to get the majority of the touches, even this Sunday. I think that Monty Ball was a starter this season. I think that he's motivated. He lost weight. Now with Hillman out, I think he sees his opportunity, and I think the coaches are going to give it to him. Now, having said that, St. Louis is not a terribly difficult matchup, so the Broncos could get up big, and both of them could play a significant amount. But just going forward in general, I think C.J. Anderson. You ever watch The Matrix?
Oh yes.
So you know that scene where he's kind of teaching Morpheus is teaching Neo about the Matrix, and there's the woman in the red dress that passes by, and Neo kind of gets distracted, and then then the agent shows up and is about to shoot him. I think C.J. Anderson is the woman in the red dress.
I know kung fu. Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that's common with chasing last week's points, right? I don't think C.J. Anderson is the kind of guy that typically puts up the kind of points he put up last week, and this is a perfect example where his situation has changed since last week. And if you chase those points, you could be in big trouble. He's a high upside guy, but I think you're playing with fire here. I would find a different situation for your day gaming lineups, or hopefully you've got other options on your fantasy team. Let's talk a little bit about, quickly while we're on this game, on the other side of the ball, they've switched quarterbacks. I don't know if anyone cares, but Shaun Hill is going to be playing instead of Austin Davis. I care because that's one less Austin that's starting in the NFL, but that is not fantasy relevant. Do you have any fantasy relevant?
I know. Our friend Denny Carter cares.
He loves Shaun Hill.
He loves Shaun Hill. but yeah. This is one of those it's a trap kind of moments for me, because I think that Shaun Hill seems like he's going to be Shaun Hill. He seems like he's going to be a really cheap option this weekend on daily sites, and a guy that's going to have to throw the ball a lot because they're going to be down a lot. But this is a situation where if the Rams are getting blown out and they're not moving the ball, I would imagine Austin Davis is going to get back in the game, is going to get back some playing time. So I would just stay away.
Yeah, and I would stay away from the whole offense. I don't like any of them. I mean, Denver's running defense is really good, so just stay away from all the Rams. The next game I want to talk about is Detroit at Arizona. Carson Palmer, unfortunately, is out for the season. We've got Drew Stanton coming in, playing against Detroit here, and do you think this has an effect on the Arizona offense, both in this game and going forward, or do you think it's like, you know what, it's more the system, Drew Stanton is okay here, it's not going to be a big deal? What do you think about the situation?
Do I think the starting quarterback being knocked out for the year affects the offense?
It's a trick question, Alex. Yeah. It's a trick question. I'm lobbing them up for you. I'm lobbing them up.
I expect a clown to pop out of the closet here. I don't know what kind of question is that. No, seriously, it's yeah. I mean, we saw Drew Stanton play earlier this year, and they did fine. The Cardinals, they won those most of they're 8-1. They're doing great, but he's thrown 2 touchdowns in 3 starts, and then he threw a touchdown last week. All his touchdowns have gone to one man. You know who that man is?
John Brown.
Yes, John Brown. So
that dance was awesome. I love the dance. He was just it was awesome. It's fantastic.
He knows kung fu too. But yeah, I mean, I just have zero confidence in any fantasy guys in Arizona. I think that there will be big games here and there from
what? Guys. Not even Andre Ellington? What?
No, I mean, I know he's my other BFF this year, but he's a volume guy. I think he'll be fine. I mean, I don't think he's going to be awful, but the whole offense takes a hit. I think that it's one of those things where we're going to see a big game here from Fitzgerald and there from Brown. But essentially, we're not going to be able to tell what's going to happen for the most part. Drew Stanton is just not that good. So,
and they have more than one Brown in that receiving core, which is really confuses things.
More than one J Brown.
Yeah, 2 J Browns. There's a lot of J Browns.
And they wear almost the same number.
I think the other issue that Arizona has going forward is they have a tough pass schedule the rest of the year. So, it's not like you can get any value for any of their pass catchers, but I wouldn't be counting on any of them or getting super excited about this John Brown explosion with his connection with Drew Stanton. Like, I think Ellington's really the only value in this offense that you can keep playing with confidence going forward.
I mean, starting this weekend, the Lions are the number 1 defense in the league, so it's going to be tough sledding.
Yeah, it's going to be it's a really tough rushing matchup for sure. Okay, on the other side of the ball, it sounds like Reggie Bush may not play this week. He's dealing with ankle issues again.
But just shut him down this year. I mean, if he's not going to play every other week, what's the point?
I know. And then Theo Riddick looks pretty good, right? I mean, is Theo Riddick a guy you might throw a dart in like a day game situation?
Yeah, if Bush is out, definitely. I mean, we've seen what he can do, especially in PPR formats like DraftKings. He's going to catch some passes. He had a huge game a few weeks ago, and I'm very glad that in our Pros versus Joes team, we threw a complete we were like, let's just pick Theo Riddick. Maybe no, yeah, right. No, I think I pushed for Theo Riddick.
I thought I pushed for Theo Riddick.
See, you can't even remember.
I can't remember.
But yeah, no, and he's kind of. We talked about our team a few weeks ago. Our running backs. Speaking of the Matrix, I feel like our team is like Neo dodging bullets. Like, we drafted. We had a horrible draft with running backs, and we have just enough every week to like make it okay that we have terrible running backs.
We drafted 10 running backs, and like 2 of them are healthy every week, and it's a different 2 every week. I feel like.
Yeah, we are Neo.
Yeah, we're totally. I've never seen running backs move that fast. So and Arizona is a tough matchup for these these Detroit running backs this week anyway. So I think if Bush is out and Joique Bell is the between the tackles guy, I might like Theo Riddick more in this situation because I think they're going to use him as the passing down back, whereas Joique Bell's not going to have much luck against this tough Arizona front. So Riddick is a guy to look at, I think. The next game we want to talk about is Houston at Cleveland. Arian Foster was recovering during the bye, but he says he feels great, and they're playing at Cleveland, so it looks like he may go this week. Are you concerned about Foster at all?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. I mean, he says he feels great. He wants to play this weekend, but he's still not practicing. And the last time he was coming back from injury, we were all bamboozled. Because he came back, he was like full, they said it was a full go. I think he had like 8 carries for 7 yards. So it was, I'd be careful with Foster. It's a good matchup. What I probably would not do is start Alfred Blue, unless Foster is out. He's not a good player anyway. But if Foster's playing, just forget about Blue.
Yeah, John Lee last week on our show had some strong feelings about Alfred Blue and said just like stay away. It doesn't matter. He's just not going to do anything. On the other side of the ball, do you have any love for any Cleveland running back, or are you just like forget it? I'm kind of done with that whole thing.
No, I like Terrence West. I mean, West he got a bunch of carries last week, and he got vultured by Ben Tate and Isaiah Crowell. So but it was a great performance anyway for West. So it seems like he's the lead back in a committee, and he's going to get a lot of touches.
He's a three-headed committee. He's a three-headed committee.
Yeah, it's like they're like the New Orleans North here. But right, yeah, the Browns are the Saints on offense. But Tate is
when Josh Gordon gets back, it's all going to change.
Yeah, exactly. But West is going to get the most touches, so I think he's fine.
Yeah, I think it's a little risky because I don't trust that coaching staff to like stick with one guy. I think they all got a lot of carries last week, but I think West is the guy you can take a gamble on as a low-end running back 2, high-end running back 3 maybe, or flex, whatever. Let's talk about Cincinnati at New Orleans. It sounds like Kyrie Robinson and Pierre Thomas might both still be out this week. Mark Ingram gets a great matchup versus Cincinnati here. He's a top 10 play here with these guys out, right?
Yeah, I mean if nobody else is gonna challenge him for playing time. I mean, Traveris Cadet. I thought Cadet was gonna get a decent amount of touches. That hasn't been the case. Ingram has been in the game, even in blowouts, closing them out. With 25, 26 carries. So I think that this is a good matchup. I think they're gonna pound the rock. They're at home. They're gonna probably have a big lead. So, I mean, I like Ingram a lot.
Yeah, and on the other side of the ball, it sounds like Giovanni Bernard might miss another week. Is Jeremy Hill someone worth starting at New Orleans?
Well, I think that all of the hype died last week after the first week he was out. Bernard was out. Hill had a huge game, and then everybody was on him last week, and he had a terrible game because the Bengals were just awful on Thursday Night Football, and so I think that'll help. I think people will be off him this week in daily spaces. And if you own Hill and I think that he's a great second, RB2 this week. So I don't expect him to have a huge game, but I think he'll get a lot of touches.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a decent matchup there, but they'll probably want to run the ball to sort of take the crowd out of it. But I think New Orleans allows other teams to score a lot of rushing TDs compared to what they usually do. 63% more rushing TDs than they typically do. So that's kind of a interesting stat that maybe Jeremy Hill gets into the end zone with that working to his advantage. But I don't really trust this offense at all. They seem to be on the downward trend.
It's not prime time. It's not prime time, so I think it's safe.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. A few other guys that we'll touch on here, and then we'll get to a couple of Twitter questions. Rashad Jennings looks like he's going to make his return versus San Francisco this week. How much can you trust Rashad Jennings' first week back here?
I think the Giants missed him a lot. We saw some flashes from Williams, and I think that Williams may have actually taken the goal line job away from Jennings over the past few weeks. But overall, Jennings is probably going to be the main man. I think he's going to get 15 to 20 touches. He's going to be involved in the receiving game like he was. So I think he's fine. I mean, San Francisco's not the best matchup, but now Patrick Willis is out for the year. And they still don't have Navarro Bowman. They're just getting Aldon Smith back, and he is more of a pass rusher anyway. So I think that it's a pretty good start for Jennings if you own him. If you've stuck with him all this time, put him in your lineups.
Yeah, I'd rather start him than gamble on a Cleveland running back, for example. He's a guy that I've been waiting to come back for a while here. I think he's a good start. A couple of tight end notes. Delaney Walker has a concussion. Sounds like he is unlikely to play versus Pittsburgh this week, but another guy who may be coming back is Kyle Rudolph at Chicago this week. He may be a guy you want to grab if you're a Walker owner who doesn't have a tight end. You've been talking about Rudolph for a while, like a few weeks on the show. Are you excited about maybe even plugging him into your lineup his first week back?
Yeah, I love Rudolph.
Yeah.
I've been talking about him for 2 weeks. What am I going to say? No, forget it. But I think that I don't think he's going to have necessarily a huge game, but I think he's going to get several targets. And it's a good matchup against the Bears, who have not been very good defensively at all. It seems like they're circling the drain now. So put Rudolph in your lineups if he's active.
Yeah, I think I would take a gamble on him too. I mean, once you get out of those top 5 or 6 tight ends, it's a little bit of a dart throw anyway. It seems like a new guy sort of pops up each week. So I would say Rudolph has just as good a chance as any guy to grab a touchdown in the game this week. The last bit of news is his teammate, Adrian Peterson. This is all over the news, and we don't have a whole lot of information to go on here, but it sounds like there's a chance he could play in Week 12 if everything falls his way. There's a chance he may not play at all this season. It depends on how things go here. My hunch is he plays Week 13. I'm just guessing. I don't have any kind of insider information here. What do you think happens here based on what you're hearing?
I would like to consult my magic 8-ball, for this answer. Hold on a second. The answer is cloudy. I don't even know the whatever. I have no idea. I mean, it seems like Goodell was taking a bit of a hard stance, saying that he wouldn't consider his time on the exempt list as time served, which makes sense because he was paid this whole time, so it's not like he's had to give up any salary. But at the same time, I think the NFLPA is going to be on his side and really defend him. I think that the Vikings are probably going to want him back, especially if they kind of claw their way into the playoff picture. They're going to want their star running back. So we'll see. I mean, the week 13, I think, is a pretty good guess. But if he comes back that week, I'm not sure that I'm that confident. That's the last week of the season. If you're in the playoffs, then yeah, plug him in and see what happens. But if he might be like rusty or whatever you want to call it, and he's got McKinnon there and Asiata, who are probably going to share carries while he kind of gets back into his groove.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that point about them being in playoff contention or not is a big factor in this, how hard they push to get him back in, because it is going to have some public relations backlash here. So it's a sticky situation that will be interesting to see how all the related parties navigate this. let's go to some of our Twitter questions. We've got Jill asking a question. Thank you, Jill, for being a regular question asker. We appreciate you listening and submitting your questions.
I love Jill. I love our regular question asker. So thank you so much. But also, if you haven't asked a question, ask one. We'll answer it.
We try to answer every question we get.
Every single one. We get like 3 a week. So send us your questions.
Yeah. Don't be shy. We don't bite. Well, Alex, sometimes
I do bite.
There was that one time, but we don't want to talk about that. But just send the questions. Jill asks, do quarterbacks struggling, Jay Cutler and Eli Manning, do they totally hose the value of their related receivers like Alshon Jeffrey or OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr.? By the way, I hear him sometimes called OBJ, and sometimes I hear him called ODB. Which do you prefer?
I call him ODB, but apparently he prefers OBJ, so I don't know. I mean, ODB is much cooler, I would say. So.
Yeah, Wu-Tang and all that. I
mean, maybe he's not a fan.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't like Wu-Tang. I mean, I'm not gonna knock a guy for not liking Wu-Tang, but I like OBJ because it is also a 3D modeling file format. Nerdy. Okay.
From Wu-Tang to that. Okay.
Yeah, so you can choose Wu-Tang or the nerdy 3D modeling file format. I don't know. I think one of those is clearly cooler, and I don't think it's Wu-Tang.
All right.
So anyway, Jill is wondering whether she should be playing Cutler again this week in a what she calls a good matchup versus Minnesota, and wondering is he a better play than Sanchez versus Green Bay?
I don't think so. I mean, Minnesota's not that good of a matchup to begin with. They are at home, but he hasn't played well at home. I mean, I don't know. I like the Sanchez in Green Bay. The one thing I will say is that it's supposed to be really cold this weekend, so I don't know if Sanchez is going to be affected. I was trying to look up some splits on him earlier today, and I couldn't get to them. But if you know, all things considered, Sanchez looked really, really good last week, and the Packers are a pretty good matchup. He's probably going to have to throw the ball a lot to keep up with the Packers. So I would rather go with Sanchez. I can't believe I'm saying these words, but that's what I think.
This is a tricky question, Jill, because looking at the numbers, Green Bay is terrible against the run, but they're actually pretty decent against the pass. Like the game script could end up, making this a kind of a shootout, which kind of works in Sanchez's favor, and I think that's why I prefer him. But Green Bay's pass defense is actually pretty decent here. And then Minnesota, we don't really think of them as having a good defense, but their pass defense is actually really good. They allow 14% less passing yards per opponent and 17% less passing touchdowns than opponents typically score. So they actually have a pretty decent pass defense here, as opposed to the rush defense, which allows teams to score more than they typically do against sort of an average defense. So I would go Sanchez here mostly because of the game script, but neither matchup is really like glowingly good here. And then to answer a question about the receivers, yeah, I mean it's kind of a bummer that it affects Jeffrey and OBJ, but those are still two guys that I really like as wide receiver 2s. Maybe high-end wide receiver 3s. Those are guys I'd still be starting.
Well, I mean, both Jeffrey and Beckham had pretty good games last week. They just didn't score. So right. I think that maybe that's the problem here. But if you're in a PPR league, I think that Jeffrey and Beckham are doing fine.
Yeah. And then Jill also asks a good question here about Ryan Matthews' return and what that does to Brandon Oliver's value. To me, Brandon Oliver becomes a less important part of this offense. Ryan Matthews steps forward and kind of returns to the role that he had at the beginning of the year, kind of the first and second down back. And Brandon Oliver, kind of picks up the passing down work and is worked in a little bit less, but still has some role, but not enough for me to want to start him. I think Matthews is worth starting this week. How do you feel about that?
Well, let me see here with Ryan Brandon Oliver, and it's gone, his value. It's I don't think that I liked Brandon Oliver earlier this year. He looked fine, but he's just been awful the past several weeks. And I think that Matthews is going to come back and take the job and run with it. I think he's going to be the lead back. So yeah, I would say I mean, maybe not this week. Wait and see what happens. But Brandon Oliver's probably droppable at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say droppable unless you need the roster spot, but he's not startable to me at all unless the situation changes. Jesse asks, what is Shane Vereen's fantasy value going forward, and how much of a dent or drain on that fantasy value is Jonas Gray in this mix? How do you view the New England backfield? I think you've written some articles on Belichickery, and so I bet you have a strong opinion about this.
Yeah. Shane Vereen is an enigma. It's like we see a great week one week and then he disappears, and that's just the way that Belichick is. So this week I like him. For example, I think that they're going to pass the ball a lot to kind of in the short game with using Vereen against the Colts, who have a pretty good secondary led by Vontae Davis. So I think that this week he's great, but it's like reading tea leaves with that backfield.
Yeah, I think you're going to get a lot of great weeks and a lot of terrible weeks. And I think I wouldn't be counting on Jonas Gray if you're a Jonas Gray owner. But Vereen, I would start him in situations where it looks like where you predict the game script to call for the Patriots to pass a lot. And otherwise, you steer clear. Generally, against soft fronts, I would be leaning more towards Gray than Vereen. So, I think he's a matchup play. And a dicey one at that, because you don't quite know what Belichick's got planned for his team each week. Otherwise, the other team would know too. He's crazy like that. You can check out kind of our player comparisons and rankings over at our website, the9route.com. We've got anything and everything having to do with our podcast, in addition to Alex's rankings and my rankings, posted over there. So if you have questions like this,
and I'll point out that Austin is ranked in the top 10 at Fantasy Pros this season. Overall for the season, he's come on strong lately, doing really well. So and just don't look at my ranking, look at Austin's ranking. So just
unless you want advice on kickers.
Tight ends. Apparently I'm decent at tight ends and quarterbacks, but
Yeah, I've been terrible at tight ends this year, but I'm number 3 at wide receiver. That's been the bane of my existence the past few years, but I'm apparently doing really well with wide receivers this year. I'm actually number 11, but I'm knocking on the door of that top 10.
Okay, number 11.
It's okay. It's okay. 11 out of about.
I got ahead of myself.
No, out of about 130, experts over there. So I'm pretty psyched about that. So thanks for the little shout out there. I work hard on my rankings, and I update them to the very last second on Sunday mornings. So if you need last minute advice, be sure to check out our website for the latest changes that come out on Sunday mornings. Did we get any other Twitter questions that we wanted to try to squeeze in here?
We got one from Lucas.
Yes, Lucas.
I'm trying to find it. So Lucas, he asks, to those planning for the playoffs, which studs should one trade away or trade for based on schedule? And I think you have more info on that than I do, so I'll throw that to you.
Yeah, I'm taking a look over at Football Guys. There's some great tools about remaining schedule that you can check out in our content, our weekly content, and they update it every week. And so I'm kind of looking at some of the playoff schedule easiness here, and it looks like New Orleans running backs have a really easy playoff schedule. Unfortunately, I think that they're going to get healthy in time to sort of kill that value a little bit. There's also, it looks like Indy and Detroit have a little bit easier. Cleveland has a little bit easier. These are all teams with like committees though, so I'm not exactly psyched to go after any of these guys. Carolina has a pretty easy one. Again, another committee. So I don't know that there's any guys I'm jazzed about except for maybe Le'Veon Bell. Pittsburgh has a really easy playoff schedule for running back. So for some reason,
he's a guy that you might be able to trade for because he hasn't done that much in recent weeks.
Yeah, so he might be like a buy low-ish candidate.
Well, he's done a decent amount. Just last week wasn't that great.
Yeah, exactly. So he's a guy I might look out for. So that's one target. I'm going to look at the receiving numbers here a little bit, and it looks like Atlanta has a really good schedule kind of down the stretch. That you might want to target. Julio, I mean, I think people, not really going to give you a deal on Julio at this point.
I don't know. Julio hasn't scored in forever, so they might, in at least in standard leagues, they might be really frustrated with him.
Yeah, I think Carolina has an easy schedule down the stretch as well. So, Kelvin Benjamin had those garbage time touchdowns this past week. If he has an off game for some reason, I think he would be a guy to target after this week's games. I really like Kelvin Benjamin in the fantasy playoffs.
Green
Um,
Bay.
yeah, Green Bay. Oh man, they
But
got
I
a
mean, good luck trading
super
for
easy.
one of those guys.
Well, what about Devonte Adams? Throwing a dart at Devonte Adams.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That yeah, Devonte Adams, not a stud, but a guy that is kind of low on people's value probably, value chart or whatever. So
Yeah.
and they have really good matchups the last 3 weeks of the fantasy season.
Yeah, and OBJ that we mentioned before, the Giants have kind of an easy, matchup going down the stretch for wide receivers. And Seattle does as well, although they don't really pass enough for me to get excited about a guy like Baldwin or Curse. But maybe Baldwin is a guy you could go after and see if the Seahawks turn around their passing game a little bit. He's probably a really cheap guy to get right now. So that maybe gives you a few guys to think about based on some of the numbers over at Football Guys. You can kind of dig into these charts a little bit more. Our buddy Clayton Gray over there, he does a great job with posting all kinds of cool stats that you can dig into like that. Let's talk some day gaming, some daily fantasy sports. We're going to talk about DraftKings first, and they've posted an interesting free roll contest this week. If you have never tried day gaming, I recommend this be the week you do it. Go over to
Yes.
DraftKings. They have a $100,000. It's for credits, for DK credits, but that's still a lot of freaking credits that you can play towards real games.
Hey,
So,
watch what's the language here?
oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's a whole lot of credits. But it's free and it's $100,000 prize pool. So I think the top prize is 10,000 credits. So why not try it this week? It's free. You don't have to give your credit card information to sign up for one of these sites. It doesn't hurt. You can kind of see what it's all about. So we'll give you some recommendations for that. Alex, tell me about your stack of the week at DraftKings.
Well, I'll tell you what. This week has been interesting at DraftKings. There's a lot of the pricing is tough. I think they've kind of buttoned it up a little bit. So, I'm looking for value if I'm stacking. And I like some of the guys you're going to mention, but RG3 and Pierre Garçon this week. They're both really inexpensive. You can get them both for just over 10,000, which is a huge deal. And granted, Garcon has been pretty bad most of the year, but they're both going up against Tampa Bay this week. RG3, and he just got back recently, and I think that he and Garcon always had that rapport. So I think that, they could get it going this week. And if for GPP lineups especially, I think you can get these guys and maybe hope for a huge game out of Garcon and save yourself a ton of money so that you could use it elsewhere, because running backs in particular are tough.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for weeks. Play your guys against Tampa Bay. This is the game I've been targeting for RG3 to sort of have a better game. And so I like this play as a tournament play. It's a good value here. And
Definitely
it's
not a cash game play.
It's not a cash game play.
Yeah.
And Garcon is a good PPR play, which DraftKings is. So I think this could be a game where Garcon turns it around. I think it's a good tournament gamble. I'm looking at guys like, man, the Rodgers and Jordy Nelson are so expensive, but that matchup against Philadelphia is so sweet. I think that if you can find value elsewhere and use these guys in probably a cash game scenario because they're so expensive, but man, like it just seems like such a juicy matchup. And if you're gonna go a little bit cheaper, maybe Sanchez and Matthews this week. They're still pretty low priced because they had their big game on Monday Night Football, so their numbers don't reflect those big performances. So Sanchez and Matthews could be a tournament play this week. Although I think a lot of people are going to be on that, so you may want to find something to differentiate yourself from other people. But that's one that I'm considering. How about some other guys at quarterback, Alex, that you like this week at DraftKings?
Drew Brees keeps kind of hovering around the same price. He's at 8,300. He barely went up this week. He's at home again. He had a nice week last week. He's got a decent matchup against the Bengals, and so I think at 8,300, another cash game guy who's probably going to score 25 points or so. 20 between 23 and 25 or 26. So, and you mentioned Rodgers. I like him a lot, even at his price, but he's then you're behind the eight ball with salary the rest of the way. And then Matt Ryan, who he was one of my stacks of the week last week, and part of one of my stacks, and he only threw one touchdown, so it just didn't work out. But he's got another really nice matchup against Carolina this week.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I like that call for him to bounce back, and I think it was a decent pick. It didn't play out well last week, but all the indicators were pointing towards him having a
Well,
big.
but so what happened last week, and kind of going back to the RG3 thing, playing Ryan and Julio stack didn't work out in terms of points. I mean, he did all right, but they didn't meet value. But it gave you money to spend elsewhere, and I did that in several contests, and did pretty well because I managed to spend the money wisely elsewhere.
Yeah, because you could have gotten Lynch and Dez and the Philadelphia defense. That's not really a price thing, but there were a lot of other.
Yeah, everybody knew that was happening. Yes.
Right. I had him in a lot of leagues, but
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. I hate you. So.
They saved my bacon. I think another potential good stash here at quarterback is Roethlisberger. His price is still pretty low. He didn't have a good week last week.
That was too obvious last week. It was just that was a trap.
Yeah, totally. Coming off the back-to-back 6 touchdown games. This week, I think he's a decent cash game play. He's only 7,200. Not really a sexy pick, but he could put it together against.
Yeah, I mean he's on the road, so that's kind of and that's he had his 12 touchdown 2-week thing at home, and he's just a different guy on the road right now. So that's kind of what making me stay away from him a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's good. It's always good to look at the home road splits, and I think Matt Ryan gets kind of a bad rap for his road performances, but the reality is he's a terrible real life quarterback on the road, but his fantasy numbers are actually about the same on the road if you look at his entire career. Now this year he's had some bad days on the road fantasy wise, but over the scope of his entire career, he's actually about the same on the road as he is.
I mean, when you have turnstile, offensive line comprised of turnstiles, that's going to happen.
And that's the bigger issue. You really only want to start him against teams that don't have a pass rush. So I think this is one of those weeks that maybe that's an opportunity. Let's talk about running backs. LeSean McCoy really let down a lot of owners last week. He's still pretty cheap at 6,400, and he gets the terrible Green Bay run defense that we mentioned before. I like this call for a bounce-back week for McCoy, but what about Darren Sproles? Are you nervous that Sproles is going to take away some of this work from McCoy?
No, Sproles kind of, it was just shocking to me, not shocking, but just hilarious that he vultured McCoy that first touchdown because it was set up perfectly for McCoy to score a touchdown, and then they put in Sproles at the goal line. Why? I don't. I guess it worked out. So they don't care about fantasy football in Philadelphia. But
how dare they not care about our fantasy football team?
I mean, McCoy was a half of a yard away from scoring 1 point on the day because they brought back a touchdown that Sanchez threw, and he finally got in the end zone. So I don't know what to think. I think that they're going to have to pass the ball a lot. I do think it's a great matchup, but so it was a great matchup last week. It's hard to stay away from McCoy at this price, though. I mean, I think that it's one of those things that you just keep pounding away at the same player every week until he, hits it big. And given the pricing at running back, again, it's kind of tough to find a pretty good running back or somebody who's going to get a lot of touches anyway and has the potential that McCoy has at that price.
Yeah, I like Alfred Morris this week. He's only 5,400, and he's playing against Tampa Bay. I like that matchup a lot. And then I see you've got Ryan Matthews on your list versus Oakland. That Oakland rush defense is terrible, so I think that is a great call. Tell me more about him.
Strictly GPP. I don't think that he's a good cash game because you don't know what you're going to get out of Matthews, but he could have a huge game. Again, I think he's going to come in and take over the lead back role right away. So at 4,500, that's a great price for a great matchup at home against the Raiders. I mean, I think that the Chargers this time around, last time the Raiders gave them a game, I think this time around they'll put the clamps down and get a big lead and try to get Matthews going.
Yeah, and speaking about getting a big lead, part of that is going to be with Keenan Allen, who's only 4,500 at DraftKings. You like him this week as a play?
Yeah, at that price for a guy who's getting a ton of targets, Allen has not had a huge year, but he's had a couple of big games. He got, he wound up with only 4 catches against the Dolphins a couple of weeks ago, but the whole offense was awful. So I think they had the bye week. They get their heads on straight in San Diego. It's not the best matchup because Oakland has been decent against the pass this year. And again, I think that they're going to get a big lead. The Chargers are going to get a big lead. But I would say Allen will get 5 or 6 catches this week, and a touchdown will make his afternoon great.
Yeah, and we talked about Jordan Matthews before. We both like his price point at only 4,500. Stack or no stack, I think he's a good guy to get into your lineup against that leaky Green Bay pass defense. And then AJ Green is only 6,000 at New Orleans. I think this is a good play too. He's a guy that I had on my radar. Are you concerned that Sanu is stealing some of these looks, or are you like, no, this is the week AJ Green comes back as the guy?
AJ Green was like wide open several times last week, and Andy Dalton was just horrific. So I think that Dalton bounces back. I mean, it's not the best matchup, but at 6,000 for a guy who he could pull a Calvin Johnson, and like last week it wasn't the best matchup for Johnson, and he had a great game. I think the same can happen with Green. Again, the Bengals are probably going to be playing catch-up this week against the Saints at home, or on the road, rather. So, at 6,000, Green is pretty good price.
Yeah, I agree. And I still like Kelvin Benjamin. That Carolina offense looked terrible until, trash time on Monday Night Football.
I was, like, snapping pencils on Monday night because I had Kelvin Benjamin in about 98% of my games, and he had 1 catch for 9 yards at one point, and into the middle of the fourth quarter, and I was like, so angry. I was so angry, and then he scored a couple garbage time touchdowns. So the game script, everybody, you need to pay attention to the game script. That's kind of what we all expected, and it worked out.
Yeah, and I think that it will work out again this week in a slightly different way. The Atlanta defense is just terrible, and so I think Benjamin's in for a game where he actually does something before the fourth quarter this week.
Yeah, so to save all our ulcers.
Yeah, exactly. And at tight end, I like his teammate Greg Olsen here as well. This is a pick that you made. He's only 5,100. To tell me more about Olsen.
Yeah, I like Olsen that price. He's getting a lot of targets. He's just not scoring touchdowns. So I think that it's a good matchup for against the Falcons. Although I haven't actually looked at how many fantasy points they've given up, but just overall the defense hasn't been good. And the Panthers are at home. I think they're gonna have to pass the ball a lot again against like you mentioned, against the Falcons. And Olsen is a big part of that offense.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, last week he didn't score, and he went about over 20 points in DraftKings. So,
yeah, the PPR element makes Olsen really appealing at DraftKings. I like Michael Rivera. Again, he's getting tons of targets. He's a really good PPR play here. He's only $3,100 over at DraftKings. I like him again this week. He's a guy played pretty heavy in tournaments this past week as an upside guy. So I like him going at San Diego. I think they're going to have to keep up with the Chargers, and I think that Rivera is going to be their top target for that. Did you have any other tight ends you wanted to mention?
I really like Dwayne Allen. I think he's one of my favorite tight ends this week at only 4,200. I think that's going to be a high-scoring game in Indianapolis. I don't think that the Patriots defend the tight end position very well. I think it's going to be, Allen is a better GPP choice than cash game because it's touchdown or bust for him. But I think he's going to catch 4 or 5 passes and get into the end zone.
Yeah, tell me, we're going to wrap things up with DraftKings. We want to also get in FanDuel before my weekly microphone explosion at 10 o'clock at night.
We have a curfew.
We have a curfew. We're going to cut this out before 10 so my mic doesn't go all BC Boys Intergalactic on y'all's. Tell me about the defense you like at DraftKings.
I think a lot of guys are going to be on the Denver Broncos defense this week, but they're only 3,000 against a St. Louis team that is starting Sean Hill this week and has lost their top receiver, and just the Denver defense has been pretty good. So I don't know why they're only 3,000.
Yeah, I think the funny thing is they're a better real-life defense than they are a fantasy defense, I feel like.
True. That's true.
But I don't dislike the call here. If you're going to go a little riskier and go cheaper on your defense, I've got my eye a little bit on the Redskins. They're coming off a bye, and they're playing at home, and they got Tampa Bay coming to town. In case you didn't notice, I'm not a big Tampa Bay believer. So I think that if you're going to go cheaper, Washington might be an interesting one that probably won't be half as owned as a defense like Denver's that you could mix up in a tournament play setup. Let's jump over to FanDuel now. I don't spend as much time at FanDuel, so I'm going to lean on you for this one a little bit. What do you see over at FanDuel?
You mentioned Mark Sanchez and Jordan Matthews, Jordan Matthews in over DraftKings. I like Mark Sanchez and Jeremy Maclin over at FanDuel, although Matthews is a great value as well. But Sanchez is only 6,900 despite last week, which is a great price over at FanDuel, and that lets you kind of spend a little bit more for the stack at Jeremy Maclin, who's 8,700. And again, I think it's a great matchup. I know that the Packers have not been too generous, but I think the Eagles are going to pass the ball a lot, and they have a great offense anyway. So look for that. And Macklin didn't, have a huge game last week, so it's one of those kind of like, okay, it's time to feed him. And then at quarterback, we talked about RG3. He's also a good price at FanDuel. I like Teddy Bridgewater at FanDuel. He's only 6,600. He's probably a good price at DraftKings too. I probably overlooked him, but he's playing at home against Chicago. And we saw what happened to Chicago last week. So, over the past several weeks, I think that Bridgewater is. What do you think about Bridgewater this week?
Yeah, I mean, that's a risky play, but if you're going to play him, this is the week to do it. Chicago is terrible. Their pass defense especially is terrible, and we saw it on display. And I think that Bridgewater will take advantage of that. He's definitely not a cash game play. This is a gamble, but I think you could differentiate yourself from other players by going with Bridgewater in your lineup. At running back, tell me about. You've got Shane Vereen on your list here. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's only 6,500. It's a half PPR format, so it's not quite as enticing. But I think this week he's gonna catch several passes. I think he's gonna be heavily involved against Indianapolis, and his opponent Ahmad Bradshaw is only 7,500. And the New England run defense hasn't been great, and so I think both Bradshaw and Trent Richardson are going to have pretty good games. But I like Bradshaw better. He's just been a better running back this year in fantasy.
Yeah. Now, on your receiver list, I like one of these guys, and I'm tired of being burned by the other guy.
You're tired of being burned by Vincent Jackson, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good and that's why he's only 6,500 over at FanDuel. He's also pretty well priced over at DraftKings, but they're playing against Washington, who doesn't, Washington doesn't have a very good defense, and Mike Evans is probably the safer guy, kind of the cash guy if you want to spend money, but Jackson is one of those guys who can go off any week, and then Jordan Matthews, we talked about him, he's only 5,500.
Yeah, I mean, Vincent Jackson is getting a ridiculous amount of targets. That's the frustrating thing with him. It's like generally targets are a fairly good indicator of future success. We've seen it on weeks for Keenan Allen where, he'll have a big week. But I feel like Vincent Jackson is getting lots of empty, hollow targets, and that is so frustrating for me. So I'm probably not taking that gamble. I think Mike Evans is the lead dog there, and I like the Jordan Matthews call. Tight end, you've got Rivera over here at FanDuel. We mentioned him over at DraftKings. Who's another tight end you like?
Well, Anthony Fasano's not practicing this week, and Travis Kelce had a down week last week, and the Seattle Seahawks have given up a lot of fantasy points to tight ends this season. So that means Travis Kelce, I think, is a great GPP option. And he's only 5,900 over at FanDuel, and I think he's only 4,000 over at DraftKings. So it's a guy we didn't talk about earlier, but I like him a lot this week.
That's a really great point about Fasano. I think that plays into Kelce's snap counts in a big, big way, because Kelce's typically only on the field about half the time because Fasano's in there blocking and catching some passes.
The one thing going against him is I think the game script in that game is going to be not conducive to the passing game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. But Kelsey's one of those guys that can move the chains, one of those big targets that can get into the end zone. So, as GPP plays go, I think he's pretty good.
All right. I want to hear your defense, and I want you to throw a dart at a kicker because I need something to mock you about this week.
I haven't even. I actually did not look at kickers this week. You know what? Dan Carpenter is playing against the Miami Dolphins this week, so that's my kicker of the week.
Revenge game.
Every time, happened earlier this season. He's going to kick 5 field goals this week. So, I have no idea what his price is. But another kind of really low-priced dart, like where you just hope they score a defensive touchdown, are the Bears. We talked about how terrible they've been, but they're only 4,600, which is a really good price. They're at home. Minnesota's not been great offensively, so don't start Teddy Bridgewater and the Chicago Bears defense. But
I was going to call you out on that. I was not going to let that go.
but you know, I think something has to give, right? So I think that if you want to kind of throw a gamble out there on defense, the Bears is a decent choice.
Yeah, I would go with either the one game script or the other. I would lean towards the Teddy Bridgewater gamble more than the Bears defense gamble.
I agree.
But it's not a terrible call. Minnesota isn't a juggernaut of offense for sure. So that about wraps things up. Alex, you got anything that we should be on the lookout for that you've put out onto the interwebs this week?
I've been writing my daily musings for the last couple weeks, and I'm actually writing a recap now from the previous week. So if you're interested in looking at just how great I did, or the misses that I had, I think it's great to look at it from my own perspective, because I'm always eager to learn, and I think everybody makes mistakes. So, but anyway, and that's free. So if you go over to Football Guys, you can look at my recap from last week for free and see what I gave you.
Nice. I like the free stuff. That's groovy. Although the Football Guy subscription is totally worth it too.
It absolutely is, yes.
There's like 100 articles a week. It's ridiculous. So check that out over at footballguys.com. You can also find all of our podcasting stuff over at the9route.com, and our rankings are at the9route.com. You can chat with us on Twitter. Alex is at Alex Miglio. I am at Austin NFL. Hopefully my mic won't explode tonight. So that's all we've got for tonight's show. We made it in before 10 o'clock. It's amazing. And until next time, may your players stay healthy, your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks. Good night.
Amen.